Welcome to So Lounge. Today we are going to be working with Simplicity 8133, which is a wrap skirt. And if you've been wondering how to lay out your pattern pieces with this kind of strange layout when you've got three different pieces and some of them are flat and some of them are on the fold, stay tuned. So Lounge is the place for beginners to learn to sew one pattern at a time. Be sure to click like and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. Now, the reason I'm going to go over this layout is because it's a little different from the regular fabric layouts that you may be used to. Now, because this is a wrap skirt, there is going to be a front panel, front left panel, and a front right panel, and then a back panel that is cut on the fold. Now, when you look at these fabric layout instructions, you may be thinking, I'm not really sure what to do. If you're using regular fabric, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you're using a border print fabric, I made a previous video and you can go check that out on how to lay out your pattern pieces on a border pattern so that the pattern of your skirt matches all the way around. And if you're not sure if you have a border print fabric or a regular print fabric, this is a border print fabric. So this is one version of this skirt that I made with a border print fabric, and I go into extreme detail about how to lay out your pattern pieces so that your border goes all the way around your skirt and looks really cool. So go check that out. If you are just using regular fabric, I'm going to walk you through all the steps to lay out your pattern pieces so that you can successfully cut everything out so you're ready to sew. Now, before we get started, make sure that your fabric is washed and dried and ironed. I am just using this novelty cotton that I got at Joann's. It is probably a broadcloth fabric, and I've done all those steps and I have ironed it so it's nice and smooth. Next, I have all my pattern pieces cut out. I've previously used all of these so they were folded. I ironed them to make sure they're nice and flat. So if you are making this skirt again or for the first time, just make sure you iron out all the creases from where the pattern was folded into the envelope. Now, this time around, I'm going to be making view C, which has the contrasting waist ties and has a pocket. So if you've been waiting and trying to figure out how to do the pocket, we're going to take care of that today. And we're just starting with the cutting layout. So I am using this butterfly fabric for the main part of the skirt, and then I'm going to be using a solid purple for the pocket and the waistband. Before we get started with the cutting, let's take a look at the pattern instructions and let's go in for a closer look. I am making version C. Clementine has come to help, and I'm going to be using 44-45 inch fabric. If you're using any kind of a novelty cotton or something that's labeled as a quilting cotton, those are usually 44 inches wide, so just make sure you're using the correct layout. Now, when you look at this fabric and the diagram here, you see that it says selvage and selvage. That means that they want us to lie our fabric flat so that the selvage of each side of the fabric is going to be on either side of the table. And then it says here that it's going to be a single thickness. Now we're going to lay out these pattern pieces right side up, and then we're going to cut them out first. And then we're going to take the rest of our fabric and we're going to fold it kind of in half so that we can place pattern piece 3, which is the back panel of the skirt, on the fold, and it's going to be placed right side down. Now, once we get to the contrasting tie, we have the tie-ended pocket, so we come down here. This is the layout for any size fabric. So it doesn't matter what the width is, the layout's going to be the same. We're going to have it folded on one side. We're going to get our waistband pieces attached because those are cut on the fold. And then we're going to have the selvages all on one end. Clementine. Okay, so we're going to have those on the end, and then the pocket will be there as well. So let's go over to our fabric and get everything laid out so we can place our pattern pieces. One other thing to consider before we lay out our fabric is which direction we want the top of the fabric to be. Now, these butterflies are going in all different directions, but some of them are flying to the top and some of them are flying to the bottom. So it just kind of depends on if that matters to you. But once we start cutting, we need to make sure that they're all going in the same direction for all of our pieces. So we want to make sure that the butterflies on the front panels are matching up with the butterflies on the back panels. So I'm going to be using purple as an accent color. I really like this butterfly over here. Where is it? This one. So this butterfly here, it's kind of going up in that direction. And so I'm going to make sure that this butterfly is kind of going up at a diagonal on all of my pattern pieces to keep that universal. Now, maybe you like this butterfly better, you want that one to be more of a visual, and then you want to make sure that one's going. So you can see how, depending on which butterfly you're focusing on, you want to lay out your pattern accordingly. So it's your choice. This is a non-directional fabric, but we do need to make sure that the fronts and the backs match up so that all the butterflies are flying in the same direction on all the parts of the skirt all the way around. All right, so following the pattern instructions, we have our fabric all flat. It's at one layer. I have one selvage here. The other one is hanging off the front of the table. I am going to put pattern piece 1 closest to me. The right side of the pattern piece is facing up, and I'm going to be laying it out with the waistline towards the top of my fabric. Now remember, that's because that's the direction I want my butterflies to go. The main butterfly that I'm emphasizing, I want that to be flying up. If you want your pattern to go in a different direction, because it's a non-directional pattern, you can turn your pattern pieces going the same direction as the instructions. Now, to get your fabric on grain, if you don't know what that means, I made a video about it, so go check that out. But basically, after you've washed and dried and ironed your fabric, you want to cut about 1 inch of the selvage, make a cut perpendicular to the selvage, and then tear that across. That line is going to be the widthwise grain line, and you want that line to be at a right angle to the lengthwise grains. So when fabric's woven, you have the threads that go up and down, which are the lengthwise grains, and the threads that go side to side. And when you have your fabric on grain, it means that those two are at perfect right angles to one another. And that means that when you cut out your garment and sew it up, everything is going to hang nice and straight like it should. It takes a few minutes to do this. It's totally worth it, especially when you're cutting on a flat surface. So we don't have a fold that we have to work on. It's a little bit more lengthy to get it on grain that way. But with this, we just want to have a top line, everything ironed, the crease ironed out of the fabric. And so we can just lay everything out and measure the pattern pieces to the line of the selvage. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by that, you need a measuring tape, and these arrows on your pattern piece that's kind of in the middle of the pattern piece, that is the grain line of the pattern piece. So that is the line we want to match with the selvage and make sure that it is even at both ends. So I'm just going to start here at the top, and I'm going to measure over to the selvage, and that is going to be, I usually scoot them over so that it's an even number. It's a little bit easier to just keep track of. Not quite 11, hold on. Moved it over too much. Okay, so that is at 11 over here on the selvage. So from the arrow to the edge is 11 inches. I am just going to put a pin in here to just kind of hold this top of the arrowhead in place. And now I'm going to go to the bottom of that line at the hem and make sure that it's still 11 inches from that line over to selvage. And it is. So I'm just going to put in another pin, and then we know that that piece is lined up on grain where it should be. Now, if you need more pins to hold this pattern piece in place before you're comfortable to cut it out, go ahead, add as many pins as you like. I usually put them at the corners, kind of going out at an angle. And just make sure that you don't cover up any of the markings or the marks on the pattern that we will need to transfer to our fabric. So just put your pins in. Once you have everything in place, then we're going to scoot the fabric towards us. If you have a cat on your cutting table, remove the cat first. And we are just going to pull everything towards us now that we have our first pattern piece in place. So let me pull this towards me. Okay, so first piece hanging off the table, not a problem. Second piece, we need to get this one on grain too. So the easiest way to do that will be to measure to that side of the grain line. And basically just repeat the entire process. So this one, I think we're gonna match it up on this side at 12, just scoot it over a little bit. That was too much. Okay, so I think that's gonna do it. Let's go in for a closer look. All right, so you can see that this is the grain line that we are measuring to. I have my tape measure lined up. I'm gonna scoot this over so it's kind of more on that 12 right in the middle. And that way I can get it all lined up. This is just not cooperating super well today. Okay, so now we have it at 12. I think we have it at 12. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in right here. And now I'm going to tilt the camera a little bit so you can see the other end of the grain line. And I'm going to move down to make sure that this end of the grain line is also on 12. And you can see that it's not quite there, so I need to move this bottom part of my pattern over. It's still not quite right. There we go. So once you get all the parts lined up, that's at 12, it's over here at the edge at 12. A little bit more. It's kind of a process, so it takes a minute to just get everything where it needs to be, but you just want to make sure that all of these lines are lined up correctly so that once you wear your garment, it's going to be a lot more comfortable because it's going to hang the way it should and not twist around your body. So once you've got in those pins, you can go in and add some extra pins to the corners to just hold everything in place. And then we are going to cut out these pieces. When it comes to cutting, you want to cut on that outside edge of the pattern. So when you first cut out your pattern, you want to be on the outside of the solid line that is appropriate for your size. And then you know that when you actually transfer your pattern to the fabric to cut it all out, it's going to be in the right place. So we are just going to start cutting out pattern piece number 2. First, that's the last one we just pinned. I'm going to use my dressmaker shears to cut it out. I like the precision that you get with shears as opposed to a rotary cutter. Now, you can use a rotary cutter if you have one. Just be careful. You keep it lined up with the edge of your fabric and your pattern, and don't cut your finger. So that's the important thing to remember. So I'm just going to go in here and start cutting my pattern pieces out. And I'm going to put this over here to hold that side in place so it doesn't fall off the table once I cut this skirt. I am cutting from the waistband area down towards the hem, and I will continue with all my pattern pieces to cut that in the same direction. And so let's go to the other side, cutting from the waist down towards the hem. And when you cut out your pattern pieces, there are little notches to match them all up together. The pattern instructions say to cut out little triangles at that point. I actually cut out the triangles on the pattern so that then I can just go back in and snip them out. So I'm going to do that right here on this side seam so I know where to connect it to the back. And then I'm going to come back and cut across this top front edge, which is the waistband, and I'm cutting from the center part out towards the side seam. There's another notch on this part of the pattern, which is where we will connect the waistband. So I'm going to cut that out. as well. And then I'm going to come around to this end and cut across the bottom hem. Now, while I'm cutting, I'm holding my pattern with my left hand and cutting with my right hand. That just makes you certain that everything is lined up and that you're not actually lifting up part of your pattern and not cutting in exactly the right place. So take your time, just cut everything out, and then we'll move on to the next step. So for piece number 1, I'm just repeating the entire process that I already did for piece number 2. So we're just going to cut everything out and cut the notches, and then we'll move on to cut piece number 3, which is the back panel on the fold. So moving on to the last major pattern piece for the skirt, the back panel, which is going to be placed on the fold. Now, because we've been cutting on a single layer, obviously there are no folds, so we need to fold part of our fabric to place this pattern piece on a fold. And remember, according to the instructions, we're going to be placing it right side down. So what I'm going to do is fold my fabric kind of in half. So I'm taking the flat part and then folding it in, and I'm going to get that all smoothed out. And remember, when I tore the top on grain to get the other pattern pieces on grain, I just retore the top edge of my fabric to make sure that it's still on grain, so that when I fold it, I'm keeping that top line all matched up, and then just smoothing out my fabric accordingly. Now, next step is to place the pattern piece along this fold line. And I have a little bit extra fabric over here. I'm going to fold it back a little bit to save some fabric in case there's something else I want to use this fabric for. I like to try and save as much as possible, and sometimes that's easier said than done. So depending on your cutting layout. But we are going to be making the other parts of the skirt in a different fabric. So I actually have more butterfly fabric than I thought I would need, but we are still good to go. Now, this one's going to be a little bit too short, so I have to pull it back over a tiny bit. And you don't have to do this if you don't care about using a little bit more fabric, but that should do it this time. Yes, so I'm going to get this outside edge lined up along the fold. I'm going to put in some pins, flatten it all out. And by putting this on the fold, we know that is going to be on the grain line. Whenever you see an arrow that has right angles, so the arrow pointing down is at a right angle to a line, that means that goes on a fold. So if you look closely at this pattern, you can see that. I'm just going to get these parts pinned down. Then we're going to cut this one out in the exact same manner as before. So we're going to cut down the side seam, then cut across the top and the bottom, and then we will be ready to move on to cut out the waistband, ties, and pocket. So previously I mentioned using a solid purple colored fabric for the waistband, ties, and pocket, and the fabric that I had is questionable. It's kind of faded in some places, and I'm not sure how long I've had it. So I got some fabric that actually matches the butterflies, even though it's a stripe. It's the same brand from Joann's, and we're going to cut the waistband, ties, and pocket out of this fabric, which I think will be bright and colorful. It goes with the overall butterfly fancifulness. So let's get started. First of all, when you look at your pattern instructions, you will notice that pattern 7 appears twice. And the reason it does is because you're cutting out the back waistband on the fold. So when you cut it out once, you're going to unfold it, and that'll be one side of the waistband, and then you cut it out a second time, and that'll be the other side. So one side will be on the outside, one side will be on the inside. It'll make sense once we get to the sewing part. Now, because I know that I'm going to be cutting 2 of number 7, I'm going to pin number 7 first. It is face down. like the instructions say, and I'm going to cut that one out first, and then I'm going to lay the second one out and then lay the rest of my pattern pieces out so everything is in the right order and I'm conserving as much fabric as possible. So I'm just going to get this started. So I've cut out the first cutting of pattern piece number 7, and I'm going to put that over here on the side so it does not get misplaced. I have laid out my second pattern piece, number 7, on the fold, have it all pinned down. Now, when you look at the pattern instructions, it wants you to line up pattern pieces 4 and 5 after you do 7 and then put the pocket on top. Because I'm going to be folding my fabric a little bit differently for the waist ties, I'm going to put the pocket at the bottom or at the top edge closest to the pattern piece number 7, and then I'm going to do pattern piece number 4 and 5. Now, just like before, we're going to get all of those lined up on the grain line so that we know our pattern pieces are where they're supposed to be, so that everything lines up nice and neat together. And I have these all ready to go. And then we're going to cut them out. I have my waistband pieces and my pocket all cut out. They are over here on the side. The last piece that I need to cut is piece number 6, which is for the tie ends that we're going to attach to the waistband and then tie. Because of the way the pattern layout suggests we lay out the ties along with the rest of the pieces, that would mean that the stripes are going to be going the length of the tie, which is not what I want. I want them to be stripy like the waistband and the pocket, and I want everything to kind of be going in the same direction. So I'm going to cut my ties in a different orientation. Now, to get the look that I want and have the ties going across the width, have the stripes going across the width of the ties, I have folded my fabric so I match the selvages. So there's a fold up here at the top of my fabric. The selvages are matched on each side, and that means that my fabric is still on grain. Now, the next thing I did was draw a line across the bottom of the arrows to get a right angle to the grain line that is on the pattern that's printed there. And I'm just going to repeat the same process to get that lined up with my selvage mark, and then I'm going to cut everything out. So it's basically the same process over and over again. We are just getting everything lined up on the grain of the fabric so that once we start putting it all together, it all works. And once I get this cut out, then we will quickly go cut out some interfacing with the corresponding pattern pieces, and then we will be ready to start sewing. Now, the very last step of the cutting instructions is the interfacing. Now, the thing you need to know about interfacing is that it is not a woven fabric. It is some fibers. They're kind of pressed together, and then they have this these little dots put on one side so that that is going to be the surface that will stick to your pattern piece once you iron it. Because it is not a woven fabric, you do not have to worry about getting it on grain. So you can pretty much lay out your pattern pieces on top of interfacing, however is going to be the most efficient way to maximize your interfacing. When you look at it, the directions specifically say just like single layer and on a fold. So with pieces 4 and 5, we are just going to lay them out. I did take them off of the fabric pieces. When I was learning to sew, I would just take the whole bunch and put it all together. And the problem is that sometimes if something shifts a little bit, you may accidentally cut off some of your fabric that you need for part of your design later. So don't do that. Just unpin everything. We're going to go back and mark everything. And so we'll just repin, and it's not a big deal. Just get everything lined up and pin it, and then get it all cut out. And then the next part is going to be, after we get these cut out, and I'm just going to do a rough cut on this so I know where they're supposed to be so I can show you how to fold. So I'm just going to cut off my interfacing. And I always have a lot of interfacing just on hand. This is just like a piece I bought. If you get it in a kind of lightweight to medium weight, it's good for most of the cotton fabrics that are labeled as quilting cottons or novelty cottons, or what's the other one they call? I can't remember. Anyway, all of those that are labeled as cottons are generally a broadcloth plain weave fabric, so a lightweight to a medium weight interfacing would work for those if you just want to buy like a couple of yards, so you always have it and it's not one of those things you forget. Now, the next thing we need to do is fold this so that we can cut the waistband, the back waistband piece, which needs to be on a fold. So I'm just folding up the bottom of it for the width of my pattern piece. Once it's just at the right width so that I can fit the whole piece on there, not quite, then I'm just going to lay that out, cut it out, and then refold my interfacing and put it back in the drawer. Now, if you have your interfacing folded, it's not a big deal if there's some creases in it. Do not try and iron it out, because then it will all stick to itself and start falling apart, which you do not want. So I've got this piece lined up, more or less. Here we go. I'm going to cut this out and I'm going to go cut out the rest of my pieces, so then we will be ready to move on to marking, which will be another video. So stay tuned and we will get going on the rest of the skirt. Once you finish cutting out your interfacing pieces, I like to go and put everything back with its fabric piece so that I know that they all go together. Pieces 4 and 5 look very, very similar, so it's a good idea to keep them close and connected to each other. I just put a pin through the interfacing and the fabric and the pattern so I know that they belong together. Now, if you follow all these steps, then you will be well on your way to making the Simplicity 8133 wrap skirt. If you stay tuned, we will be doing a quick little video on marking all your pattern pieces. That's another really important part. And then we will move on to sewing. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. And if you've got questions but no one to answer them, head on over to Let's Talk Sewing for Beginners, hosted by Sew Lounge. It's an interactive Facebook group where you can ask all the questions you want and I will get you some answers. There's a link in the description below, so click and join today. Until we meet again, happy sewing!